My sister's last wish was for you to meet your daughter." Barbara's words echoed through the mansion's entrance hall, shattering the silence Harold Moore had built around his empty life. He froze, his whiskey glass nearly slipping from his trembling hand. There, at the door of his 16,000-square-foot home, stood a blonde woman he'd never seen before, firmly holding the hand of a little girl in a pink dress. The child had blonde pigtails and brown eyes exactly like his. "Tracey Watson," Barbara continued, her voice heavy with pain and determination. "My sister. She passed away 3 months ago, but before she died, she made me swear I would find you and tell you the truth." The name hit Harold like a punch to the gut. Tracey, the woman from the only night he'd allowed himself to be vulnerable, to be human, to be real. The woman who had mysteriously disappeared after that magical night 6 years ago. "That's impossible," Harold whispered, but his eyes couldn't look away from the little girl. The resemblance was undeniable, painfully obvious. "Her name is Cynthia," Barbara said, tears beginning to roll down her face. "She's 5 years old. And she's your daughter, Harold Moore. Tracey tried to tell you, tried to reach you dozens of times. But your assistant blocked her, humiliated her, told her you would never accept a child from a poor nobody." Rage began to boil in Harold's chest. Martha. That woman had destroyed everything. "Tracey raised your daughter alone, working 2 jobs, struggling every single day," Barbara continued, her voice breaking. "And when she was dying in the hospital, her only wish was for Cynthia to know her father. For you to know you had a daughter who needed you." The little girl looked at Harold with those familiar brown eyes and asked with the devastating innocence of a child, "Are you really my daddy?" And in that moment, Harold Moore's life changed forever. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The autumn sun was setting over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Inside his sprawling mansion in the Paradise Valley Hills, Harold Moore stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, watching the day fade into darkness. The amber liquid swirled in the crystal glass, catching the dying light, but Harold barely noticed. His dark brown hair was perfectly styled, his black Armani suit still crisp despite the late hour, but his brown eyes were hollow, tired. It was Saturday evening. Most men his age would be out with friends on dates, enjoying life. Harold had just finished a 3-hour video conference with investors in Tokyo. The silence of his empty mansion pressed against him like a physical weight. 16,000 square feet of marble floors, designer furniture, and state-of-the-art technology, yet it all felt cold, lifeless. A beautiful cage for a man who had forgotten how to truly live. Harold took a long sip of his drink, feeling the burn slide down his throat. He was 33 years old, a self-made millionaire, CEO of Moore Tech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing software companies in Arizona. He had everything money could buy, everything except the one thing he secretly craved in the depths of his heart, a desire he had buried under years of work and calculated ambition. A family, a child, someone to come home to who actually cared whether he arrived or not. The doorbell rang, shattering the heavy silence. Harold frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Martha, his assistant, usually vetted all his visitors, scheduling them with military precision. Martha had gone home hours ago, though, and besides, nobody just showed up at his house unannounced. He set down his glass and walked through the cavernous living room, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble. He opened the heavy oak door, and his breath caught in his throat. Standing on his doorstep was a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, with long blonde hair that caught the porch light. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, and her blue eyes were filled with a mixture of determination and fear. But it wasn't the woman who made Harold's heart skip a beat. It was the little girl whose hand she held tightly. The child was maybe 5 years old, with blonde hair styled in adorable pigtails tied with pink ribbons. She wore a pink dress with white flowers and white shoes, and she was looking up at Harold with wide, curious brown eyes that looked exactly like his own. The shape of her face, the curve of her eyebrows, Even the way she tilted her head slightly as she studied him. Everything about her was achingly familiar. "Harold Moore?" the woman asked, her voice trembling slightly despite the steel in her spine. Harold found his voice, though it came out rougher than usual. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman took a deep breath, squeezing the little girl's hand as if drawing courage from her. "My name is Barbara Watson. This is Cynthia." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I need to talk to you about my sister, Tracey Watson." The name hit Harold like a lightning bolt. Tracey. Oh God, Tracey. 6 years vanished in an instant, and Harold was back at the Phoenician resort, at a tech conference that had seemed unbearably boring until she walked into his life. Tracey had been working the event, serving drinks with a smile that lit up the entire ballroom. Harold had been standing alone at the bar, exhausted from networking and fake conversations, when she'd approached with a tray of champagne flutes. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she'd said with a conspiratorial grin. And just like that, they'd started talking. Really talking, not the superficial business exchanges Harold was so used to. She was funny, genuine, unimpressed by his wealth and status. For the first time in years, Harold had felt like himself. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, just Harold, a man laughing with a beautiful woman who saw him for who he really was. One conversation had turned into 2 hours, 2 hours had turned into 4, and by the time the conference hall emptied, Harold hadn't wanted the night to end. Neither had Tracey. They'd walked through the resort gardens under the stars, sharing stories and dreams, and when she'd looked at him with those warm, kind eyes, Harold had felt something he thought he'd lost the capacity for. Hope. Connection. The possibility of something real. They'd spent the night together, not just physically but emotionally, opening up in ways Harold never did. He'd told her about his lonely childhood, his workaholic parents, his fear that he'd become just like them. She'd shared her dreams of traveling, her love of simple things, her belief that happiness wasn't found in bank accounts but in moments. When Harold woke up the next morning with her blonde hair spread across his chest, he'd felt something he'd never experienced. Peace. Then his phone had rung. Martha, frantic about an emergency board meeting, a potential hostile takeover. Harold had kissed Tracey's forehead, left his business card on the nightstand with a note promising to call, and rushed out. He'd tried to reach her afterward, but when he called the resort, they said Tracey had quit without notice. He'd only had her first name and the resort's records were confidential. Martha had told him it was inappropriate for a man of his position to chase after a cocktail waitress, and that he should focus on what matters. Eventually, drowning in work and convinced Tracey had decided their worlds were too different, Harold had let the memory fade, tucked away like a beautiful dream. But looking at this little girl on his doorstep, Harold realized it hadn't been just a dream. It had been real, and it had consequences. "Where is Tracey?" Harold asked, his voice barely above a whisper, though part of him already knew the answer from the sadness in Barbara's eyes. Barbara's face crumpled slightly and she blinked rapidly. She passed away 3 months ago. Heart complications. She'd had a weak heart her whole life, but after Cynthia was born, it got worse. She fought so hard to stay with her daughter, but in the end, her voice broke and she took a shaky breath. In the end, it wasn't enough. Harold felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Tracey, gone. That bright, beautiful soul extinguished. He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. "I'm so sorry," he managed to say, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "But I don't understand. Why are you here? Why now?" Barbara looked down at the little girl and her expression softened with deep love. "Because before Tracey died, she made me promise something. She made me swear that I would find you and tell you the truth." She looked back up at Harold, and now the tears spilled down her cheeks. "Harold Moore, this is Cynthia. She's 5 years old, and she's your daughter." The world tilted on its axis. Harold stared at the little girl who was now looking at him with those impossibly familiar brown eyes. His eyes. His daughter. That's impossible, Harold breathed. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't. The math was right. The resemblance was undeniable. Why didn't Tracey tell me? I would have been there. I would have helped. I would have... He couldn't finish the sentence, emotion choking his throat. She tried. Barbara's voice rose, fierce and protective. Do you think my sister just kept this from you for fun? She tried to reach you, Harold, over and over again. She called your office dozens of times. She sent emails. She even showed up at More Tech Solutions when she was 7 months pregnant, desperate to tell you. What? I never received any calls, any messages. I would have remembered. I would have... Your assistant blocked her every single time. Barbara's hands were shaking now, her voice raw with anger and pain. That woman, Martha Reynolds, told my sister that you wanted nothing to do with her. She called Tracey a gold digger, a nobody trying to trap a rich man with lies. When Tracey showed up at your office, Martha had security escort her out, told her if she ever came back, she'd file harassment charges. Tracey was terrified, humiliated, and 8 months pregnant with your child. Harold felt rage building in his chest, hot and volcanic. Martha had done this. She'd kept his daughter from him, had sentenced Tracey to struggling alone, had stolen 6 years of his life as a father. Martha told Tracey that you would never accept a child from someone like her, Barbara continued, her voice breaking. That you were way out of her league, that she should be ashamed for even trying. My sister cried for weeks. She loved you, Harold. That night you shared meant everything to her, and she thought maybe you felt the same. But after Martha's treatment, Tracey was convinced you'd sent your assistant to clean up your mess. So she stopped trying. She raised Cynthia alone, working 2 jobs, struggling every single day because she was too proud and too hurt to try again. Harold looked at the little girl, at Cynthia, his daughter, and felt tears burning his eyes for the first time in over a decade. Oh, God, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear to you, Barbara, I didn't know. Cynthia had been quiet this whole time, watching the adults with solemn understanding far beyond her years. Now she spoke, her voice small but clear. Are you really my daddy? Harold crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. She had his eyes, his eyebrows, the shape of his face. But she had Tracey's blonde hair, her delicate features, her gentle spirit he could already see shining through. I think I might be, sweetheart, Harold said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Would that be okay with you? Cynthia considered this seriously, tilting her head in that heartbreakingly familiar way. Mommy used to show me a picture. She said my daddy was a good man who didn't know about me. She said if he knew he would love me. Her bottom lip trembled. Did you not know about me? No, baby girl, I didn't, Harold said, and a tear finally escaped, rolling down his cheek. But your mommy was right. If I had known, I would have loved you from the very first moment. I would have been there for both of you. Will you love me now? Cynthia asked in a whisper. Harold couldn't speak. He just nodded. And then, acting on pure instinct, he opened his arms. Cynthia looked at Barbara, who nodded encouragingly, and then the little girl stepped forward into her father's embrace for the first time. Harold wrapped his arms around his daughter and held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her little hands clutch his expensive suit jacket. In that moment, everything else faded away. The mansion, the company, the money, none of it mattered. This tiny person in his arms was his daughter, his blood, his family, and he had missed 5 years of her life. Please come in, Harold said hoarsely, pulling back and standing. We need to talk. Barbara nodded, and they entered the mansion. If Barbara was impressed by the luxury surrounding them, she didn't show it. Her focus was entirely on Cynthia, protective and watchful. They settled in the living room, Cynthia sitting between them on the long leather sofa, her little legs dangling above the floor. Harold sat across from them, his hands clasped tightly together. Tell me everything, he said. I need to know everything. Barbara took a deep breath and began. She told him about Tracey's pregnancy, how scared but excited she'd been, How she'd worked at a coffee shop until she was 8 months along, saving every penny. How Barbara had moved in with her to help, sleeping on a lumpy couch in a one-bedroom apartment. How Cynthia had been born on a rainy February morning, 6 pounds 4 ounces, with a cry that sounded like music. Tracey was an amazing mother, Barbara said, her eyes distant with memory. She sang to Cynthia every night, made up stories about magical kingdoms, turned every day into an adventure even when we barely had money for groceries. Cynthia was loved every single second of her life. And Tracey's heart? Harold asked gently. Barbara's expression darkened. She'd had a heart condition since childhood, but it wasn't severe. The pregnancy put extra strain on it, though, and after Cynthia was born, it progressively worsened. She needed medication, regular checkups, and eventually she needed surgery that we couldn't afford. Barbara's voice cracked. She kept working, kept pushing, kept being the best mom in the world. But her body just couldn't keep up. 3 months ago, her heart finally gave out. She died in the hospital with Cynthia and me by her side. What did she say? At the end? Harold needed to know. Barbara wiped her tears. She made me promise to find you. She said Cynthia deserved to know her father, deserved to have the life Tracey couldn't give her. She said you were a good man, that what you shared was real, and that if you knew the truth, you would do the right thing. Her last words were, "Tell him I forgive him and tell him to love our daughter." The weight of it all was crushing. Harold put his face in his hands, overwhelmed by grief for a woman he'd known for one night, but who had given him the greatest gift. Grief for the years stolen from him. Rage at Martha for her interference. And beneath it all, a fierce, protective love for the little girl sitting across from him. "What do you need from me?" Harold finally asked, looking up. "What do you want?" "I don't want your money," Barbara said firmly. "Tracey would never forgive me if I came here looking for a handout. But Cynthia deserves to know her father. She deserves the truth. I have legal guardianship of her, and I love her like she's my own, but I can't deny her the chance to know you." Harold nodded slowly. "I want to be part of her life. I want to be her father, if she'll have me." He looked at Cynthia, who was watching him with those big brown eyes. "But I understand this is complicated. I'm a stranger to her. We'll need time. And I'll need proof." Barbara stiffened. "Proof?" "A DNA test," Harold said quietly. "Not because I don't believe you. Look at her, she's clearly mine. But for legal reasons, for custody agreements, we'll need official documentation. I hope you understand." Barbara relaxed slightly. "Of course, that makes sense. I'll arrange it tomorrow," Harold promised. "But in the meantime," he looked at Cynthia again. "Would you like to see your room?" Cynthia's eyes widened. "My room, here?" "If you want one," Harold said with a small smile. "I have a lot of rooms that don't get used. One of them could be yours. Would you like to help me decide which one?" For the first time, Cynthia smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yes, please." Harold stood and offered his hand. Cynthia took it without hesitation, and Harold's heart nearly burst at the simple trust in that gesture. As they walked through the mansion, Cynthia's eyes grew wider and wider. "It's like a castle," she breathed, taking in the high ceilings, the grand staircase, the artwork on the walls. "I suppose it is," Harold agreed, looking at his home through new eyes. It did look like a castle. A cold, empty castle. But castles need princesses to make them homes. "Do you think you could be my princess?" Cynthia giggled, a sound that Harold knew he'd remember for the rest of his life. "Okay." They explored the second floor, looking at different bedrooms. Some were formal, decorated in neutral tones. Others were completely empty. But then Harold opened the door to a corner room with large windows overlooking the valley and the distant mountains. "This one gets the sunrise," Harold said softly. "And look, there's a window seat where you could read or draw." "I love drawing," Cynthia exclaimed, running to the window. "Mommy always hung my pictures on the fridge." "Then we'll hang them here," Harold promised. We'll cover the walls with your art, and we can paint the room any color you want. What's your favorite? Pink, Cynthia said immediately, then hesitated. But maybe that's too much pink. Aunt Barbara says I have a lot of pink. Barbara had followed them upstairs and was standing in the doorway, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. You can have as much pink as you want, sweetheart, she assured her niece. Then pink it is, Harold declared. We'll go shopping this week for everything you need. Furniture, decorations, toys, books, whatever makes you happy. Cynthia beamed at him, and Harold felt something shift in his chest. This was purpose. This was meaning. This tiny person with his eyes and Tracey's smile was the answer to every question he'd been too afraid to ask. The DNA test was arranged for Monday morning. It was a simple cheek swab, and the lab promised results within 72 hours, expedited at Harold's request and considerable fee. During those 3 days, Harold found himself thinking of nothing else. He couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't focus on emails or conference calls. All he could think about was Cynthia. Barbara brought her over twice during the waiting period. On Tuesday afternoon, they came for lunch, and Harold ordered pizza because Cynthia said it was her favorite. They sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating pepperoni pizza on paper plates. And Harold listened as Cynthia told him about her school, her friends, her favorite TV shows. I like unicorns, she informed him seriously, and butterflies, and the color purple but not as much as pink. Those are all excellent things to like, Harold agreed, equally serious. What do you like? Cynthia asked. Harold paused. What did he like? When had he last thought about things he enjoyed rather than things he needed to accomplish? I like buildings, he said finally. Designing them, creating them. I like watching things get built from nothing. Like Legos? Cynthia's face lit up. Exactly like Legos, Harold smiled. I love Legos. Aunt Barbara got me a set for my birthday, but I didn't have anyone to build it with. Cynthia looked at him hopefully. Could we build it together? I would love that, Harold said, and meant it with his whole heart. On Wednesday evening, Barbara brought Cynthia over again, this time with an overnight bag. She has preschool tomorrow morning, Barbara explained. I thought maybe you'd like to take her, if that's okay. Harold was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. I'd be honored, but I've never taken a kid to school before. What do I do? Barbara smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. You get her there by 8:15. Her teacher is Mrs. Henderson. Cynthia will show you where to go. Just be there for her. That's all she needs. That night, Harold and Cynthia built her Lego set together on the floor of what would become her room. It was a castle, appropriately enough, with towers and flags and tiny royal figures. Cynthia chattered constantly as they worked, telling him stories about each character, creating elaborate adventures. Harold listened to every word, committing it all to memory. When bedtime came, Harold was at a loss. He'd never put a child to bed before. Barbara had packed Cynthia's pajamas, a pink set with unicorns, and Harold helped her brush her teeth in one of the mansion's many bathrooms. Then came the hard part. Mommy used to read me stories, Cynthia said, climbing into the guest room bed that suddenly seemed too big for her small body. I don't have any children's books, Harold admitted, feeling like a failure. Cynthia thought about this. That's okay. Mommy used to make up stories sometimes. Can you do that? Harold sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing. I can try. What should the story be about? A princess, Cynthia said promptly. And a butterfly. So Harold, CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, who spent his days negotiating contracts and managing stockholders, made up a story about a princess who could talk to butterflies. He had no idea if it was any good, but Cynthia listened with rapt attention, her eyes growing heavier and heavier until they finally closed. Harold sat there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep. She looked so peaceful, so perfect, so small. He gently brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead and whispered, I promise I'll be the father you deserve. I promise I won't let you down. Thursday morning, the DNA results arrived via email. Harold opened them on his phone while Cynthia ate cereal at his kitchen counter, her legs swinging. His hands shook as he read the words, 99.99% probability of paternity. Official, scientific, undeniable. Cynthia was his daughter. Harold set down his phone and looked at the little girl who was humming as she ate her Cheerios. His daughter, his child, the miracle he'd thought he'd never have. Everything okay? Cynthia asked, noticing his stare. Everything's perfect, Harold said, his voice thick. Absolutely perfect. After dropping Cynthia at preschool, watching her skip into the building with her pink backpack, Harold drove directly to his office. He didn't call ahead, didn't send a warning. He simply walked through the glass doors of More Tech Solutions, took the elevator to the executive floor, and marched straight to his office. Martha was there, as always, sitting at her desk outside his door. She looked up with her usual professional smile, her dark hair pulled into its customary tight bun, her gray suit immaculate. Good morning, Mr. Moore. I wasn't expecting you until 10. Shall I get your coffee? In my office, now. Harold's voice was ice. Martha's smile faltered at his tone, but she followed him into his office, closing the door behind her. Harold didn't sit. He stood behind his desk, gripping the edge of it, trying to contain the fury threatening to explode. Is something wrong, sir? Martha asked, confusion and worry crossing her face. 6 years ago, Harold began, his voice dangerously quiet. A woman named Tracey Watson tried to contact me. Do you remember her? The color drained from Martha's face. That was all the confirmation Harold needed, but he pressed on. She called this office, she sent emails. She came here in person, 8 months pregnant, desperate to tell me something important. Do you remember what you did, Martha? Mr. Moore, Do you remember? Harold's voice rose, his control snapping. Do you remember telling her I wanted nothing to do with her? That she was a gold digger? That she was trash trying to trap me? Martha's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was pregnant, Martha. Pregnant with my child. A daughter I didn't know existed until 3 days ago. Harold slammed his hand on the desk. You kept my daughter from me. You sent away the mother of my child, humiliated her, threatened her, and for what? What gave you the right? I was protecting you. Martha finally found her voice, tears forming in her eyes. She was nobody, Harold. A cocktail waitress trying to trap you. You have a company to run, a reputation to uphold. I couldn't let some woman ruin everything you've built over one night of poor judgment. Poor judgment? Harold laughed bitterly. That one night gave me a daughter. A beautiful, perfect little girl who I've missed 5 years of her life. 5 years, Martha. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, all stolen from me because you decided you knew better. I did what I thought was best, Martha said, but her voice wavered. You did what was best for you, Harold shouted. You've been my assistant for 10 years, Martha. 10 years of controlling my schedule, my meetings, my entire life. Did you really think I didn't notice? The way you glared at any woman who showed interest? The way you just happened to schedule meetings whenever I had a date? You weren't protecting the company. You were protecting your position, your control over me. Martha's face crumbled. I've dedicated my life to you. Everything I do is for you and this company. No, Harold said coldly. Everything you did was for yourself. And because of your selfishness, Tracey Watson had to raise our daughter alone. She struggled, worked 2 jobs, could barely afford food, and eventually her health failed and she died. She died, Martha, without me ever knowing I had a daughter. Without me being able to help or support or even say thank you for giving me the greatest gift I could ever receive. I didn't know she would die, Martha whispered. You didn't care. Harold's eyes blazed. You didn't care about her, about my daughter, about anything except your own twisted sense of control. Well, it's over. You're fired, Martha. I want you out of this building within the hour. Security will escort you. You can't do this. Martha's tears were flowing freely now. I've given you everything. I know this company inside and out. You need me. I need people I can trust, Harold said flatly. I need people who respect me enough to let me make my own decisions about my own life. That's not you. It never was. He picked up his phone. Security? I need an escort to the executive floor. Martha stared at him, disbelief and devastation warring on her face. Harold, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. I can apologize to her, to the child. Please. Her name is Cynthia, Harold said softly. My daughter's name is Cynthia, and she's the most important person in my world now. There's nothing you can do to fix what you've broken, Martha. Now get out. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Martha looked at Harold one last time, mascara running down her face, then allowed herself to be led away. Harold sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. His hands were shaking. He'd never fired anyone in anger before, never lost his temper like that. But the rage had been righteous, necessary, and now in its wake came a strange sense of clarity. His entire life had to change. No more 70-hour work weeks. No more putting the company above everything else. He had a daughter now, a little girl who needed her father. Everything else was secondary. Harold pulled out his phone and called Barbara. She answered on the second ring. It's done, he said simply. Martha's been fired. And Barbara, I want to be in Cynthia's life. Really in it. Whatever that takes, whatever arrangements we need to make, I'm all in. There was a pause, and then Barbara's voice came through, warm and relieved. She'll be so happy. We both will. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Harold hired a new assistant, a kind, older woman named Patricia who treated Cynthia like a granddaughter whenever she came by the office. He worked with Barbara to create a custody arrangement, not yet official but based on what was best for Cynthia. She spent weeknights with Barbara in her modest apartment, where she had her friends and her school routine, but weekends were increasingly spent at Harold's mansion. Harold threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business. He watched YouTube videos on how to braid hair, practiced until his fingers ached, and surprised Cynthia one Saturday morning by actually managing 2 decent pigtails. That morning had been particularly special. Harold had woken up early, determined to master the art of braiding before Cynthia came downstairs for breakfast. He'd watched the same tutorial 5 times, practicing on pieces of rope he'd found in his garage. When Cynthia appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Harold was ready. Good morning, princess. Come here. I have a surprise for you. Cynthia climbed onto the chair Harold had positioned in front of the bathroom mirror. She looked skeptical. Are you going to do my hair? But you said you couldn't do hair. I've been practicing, Harold said with mock seriousness. I think I'm ready. He worked carefully, tongue between his teeth in concentration, sectioning her blonde hair and beginning to braid. Cynthia watched in the mirror, her eyes growing wider as she saw actual pigtails taking shape. Daddy, you did it. They look so pretty. She touched them gently, as if they might fall apart. Harold felt a surge of pride that rivaled anything he'd felt closing a business deal. You think so? They're perfect. Cynthia threw her arms around his waist. You're the best daddy ever. Harold hugged her back, blinking away unexpected tears. I'm trying, sweetheart, I'm really trying. He learned to cook simple meals because Cynthia liked homemade food better than takeout. His first attempt at macaroni and cheese was a disaster. The pasta overcooked and clumpy. The cheese sauce somehow both runny and lumpy. But Cynthia ate it anyway, declaring it the best mac and cheese ever, even as she struggled to swallow the terrible concoction. You don't have to lie to me, baby girl, Harold laughed. I know it's awful. It's not awful, Cynthia insisted loyally. It's special because you made it for me. That makes it taste good. Harold ordered pizza that night, but he also ordered 3 cookbooks and spent the next week mastering basic recipes. By the following weekend, he could make decent spaghetti, edible chicken nuggets, and pancakes that were only slightly burnt around the edges. He read parenting books late into the night, determined to do this right. Books about child development, about trauma and loss, about helping children process grief. He learned that Cynthia's occasional tantrums weren't misbehavior, but a 5-year-old's way of processing complex emotions. He learned that consistency mattered more than perfection, that saying, "I don't know, but let's figure it out together," was better than pretending to have all the answers. One particularly difficult night, about 2 months into their new arrangement, Cynthia had a complete meltdown. She'd been playing happily. Then suddenly she was screaming and crying, inconsolable. Harold tried everything he could think of, but nothing worked. Finally, not knowing what else to do, he called Barbara. "She's asking for Tracey," Harold said helplessly, his own voice thick with emotion. "She keeps crying for her mommy, and I don't know what to do. I can't bring Tracey back. I can't fix this." "You're not supposed to fix it," Barbara said gently. "Just be with her. Hold her. Let her cry. Grief isn't something you solve, Harold. It's something you survive together." So Harold sat on the floor of Cynthia's room, gathered his sobbing daughter into his lap, and just held her. He didn't try to stop her tears or distract her with promises of toys or treats. He just rocked her gently and said, "I know, baby. I know you miss her. It's okay to miss her. I've got you. Daddy's got you." Eventually, Cynthia's sobs quieted to hiccups, and she looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "Do you think Mommy can see me from heaven?" "I think she can," Harold said softly. "And I think she sees how brave and strong you are, how much you're loved, how beautiful you're growing up to be." "I don't want to forget her," Cynthia whispered, her biggest fear finally voiced. Harold's heart broke. "You won't forget her, sweetheart. We'll make sure of it. We'll talk about her, look at pictures, tell stories. Your mommy will always be part of our family, okay? Always. Promise?" "I promise." Cynthia fell asleep in his arms that night, exhausted from crying. Harold carried her to bed, tucked her in carefully, and then sat in the hallway outside her room, his back against the wall, and cried himself. Cried for Tracey, who had loved her daughter so much and died too young. Cried for Cynthia, who was processing loss no child should have to face. Cried for all the moments he'd missed and could never get back. But he also felt grateful. Grateful that he was here now. Grateful that Cynthia had let him comfort her. Grateful that he was learning, slowly, how to be what she needed. Cynthia's room transformation became a project they worked on together, another way Harold learned to be present. They painted the walls a soft pink, and Harold let Cynthia help, even though she got more paint on herself than the walls. He hired an artist to create a mural of butterflies and unicorns, and Cynthia sat and watched for hours, fascinated by the creative process. "When I grow up, I want to paint pictures like that," she declared. "Then we'll get you art lessons," Harold promised immediately. "Really?" Cynthia's face lit up. "Really. Whatever you want to try, whatever interests you, we'll explore it together." They shopped for furniture together too, spending an entire Saturday at various stores. Harold let Cynthia make all the decisions, even when she chose a bed shaped like a carriage that cost 3 times what he'd planned to spend. Watching her face glow with excitement as she tested every bed in the children's section was worth any price. "This one," she exclaimed, bouncing on the carriage bed. "I feel like a real princess." "Then this is the one we'll get," Harold agreed, making a mental note to also buy the matching wardrobe and desk she kept admiring. Harold had shelves installed for her growing book collection, and he started a tradition of buying her a new book every week. They'd go to the bookstore together on Saturday mornings, and Cynthia would spend an hour carefully selecting her choice. Then they'd go to a nearby coffee shop, where Harold would drink his usual black coffee and Cynthia would have hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and they'd read her new book together. "This is my favorite time of the whole week," Cynthia told him one Saturday, chocolate on her upper lip. "Mine too, princess," Harold said, and meant it completely. He also made sure Tracey's memory stayed alive in Cynthia's daily life. He had a portrait of Tracey painted from photographs and hung it in Cynthia's room. He created a mommy box, where Cynthia could keep special mementos, letters Tracey had written, small gifts she'd given. They lit a candle for Tracey every Sunday evening, and Cynthia would tell a story about something she remembered. "Mommy used to sing me this song," Cynthia said one evening, and she sang a lullaby in her small, sweet voice. Harold recorded it on his phone, wanting to preserve this memory forever. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Do you want me to sing it to you at bedtime?" "Yes, please. It makes me feel like Mommy is still here." So every night Harold sang the lullaby, his voice rough and uncertain but full of love, and every night Cynthia fell asleep with a small smile on her face, comforted by the continuity of her mother's love flowing through her father's actions. "This is the most beautiful room in the whole world," Cynthia declared the day her room was finally finished, spinning in circles with her arms out. "It's for the most beautiful girl in the whole world," Harold replied, and Cynthia ran to him, hugging him tight. "I love you, Daddy," she said, and Harold's heart nearly exploded. "I love you too, Princess, so much." Through all of this, Barbara was a constant presence. At first, Harold told himself it was just about Cynthia, about co-parenting and making arrangements. But as weeks turned into months, he began to notice things about Barbara that had nothing to do with being Cynthia's aunt. He noticed the way she laughed, a full, genuine sound that made him want to join in. He noticed how patient she was with Cynthia, never getting frustrated even when the little girl was having a tantrum. He noticed the way she'd push her blonde hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how her blue eyes lit up when she talked about her students, how she always put others before herself. Barbara never asked Harold for anything. She never tried to take advantage of his wealth. When he offered to pay for things, she politely but firmly declined. When he tried to give her money for Cynthia's expenses, she only accepted what was directly needed for their daughter. She worked full-time as a kindergarten teacher, lived in a small but tidy apartment, and seemed content with her simple life. It fascinated Harold. Every other person he knew wanted something from him, saw him as a walking ATM or a stepping stone to success. Barbara just saw him as Cynthia's father, and increasingly, as a friend. They fell into a routine. Barbara would drop Cynthia off Friday evenings, and Harold would bring her back Sunday nights. But often Barbara would stay for dinner. Then she started staying to help put Cynthia to bed. Then one night, after Cynthia was asleep, Harold made coffee, and they sat in his living room talking until past midnight about everything and nothing. "I always thought money would solve all problems," Harold admitted, cradling his mug. "That's why I worked so hard to make it. But Cynthia doesn't care about money. She just wants time, attention, love. That's what all children want," Barbara said softly. "What all people want, really. We just forget that as we get older." "You've given up so much for her," Harold observed. "Your freedom, your ability to date, to live your own life." Barbara shook her head. "I haven't given up anything. Cynthia is the best thing in my life. When Tracey died, I was devastated. Cynthia needed me, and I needed her. She saved me from drowning in grief. You're an amazing mother to her." "She's not my daughter," Barbara said, but there was no bitterness in it, just fact. "She's yours and Tracey's. I'm just honored to help raise her." Harold looked at this woman, really looked at her. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, her hair in a casual ponytail. She was beautiful in a natural, effortless way that made his chest tight. But more than that, she was kind, selfless, strong. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for keeping Tracey's promise, for bringing Cynthia to me, for giving me a chance to be her father. I know it would have been easier to just keep her, to raise her yourself without complicating things." Barbara met his eyes. "Cynthia deserved to know her father. You deserve to know your daughter. That's what Tracey wanted, and she was right. You're good for her, Harold. She's happier than I've seen her since Tracey died." Something passed between them in that moment, something neither was quite ready to name but both felt. The air seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Then Harold cleared his throat and stood. "It's late. Let me drive you home." "I can take an Uber," Barbara protested. "Absolutely not. It's midnight. I'm driving you." It became another part of their routine, these late-night conversations, with Harold driving Barbara home through the quiet Phoenix streets, both of them reluctant for the evening to end, but not quite sure how to extend it. Months passed. Cynthia thrived, growing more confident and joyful with each passing week. She had 2 homes now, 2 adults who loved her, and the security of knowing she was wanted and cherished. She still missed Tracey, still sometimes cried for her mommy, but she was healing. Harold was healing too. The cold, closed-off CEO was melting away, replaced by a man who laughed often, who left work at 5 to pick up his daughter from school, who built Lego castles on the floor and wore pink tiaras during tea parties. His business associates were shocked by the change, but Harold didn't care. He'd finally found what mattered, and Barbara was healing as well. The grief of losing her sister was still there, would always be there, but it was softening around the edges. She saw Tracey and Cynthia every day, in her laugh and her kindness and her joy, and it comforted her. And spending time with Harold, watching him transform into an amazing father, made her believe in second chances. It was a Saturday afternoon in spring when things shifted. Harold had suggested a picnic at Papago Park, and the 3 of them spread out a blanket under the shade of a huge Palo Verde tree. The Arizona sun was warm but not yet brutal, and the desert was in bloom, wildflowers dotting the red rocks in patches of yellow and purple. Cynthia ate her peanut butter sandwich, and then immediately spotted a butterfly. "I'm going to catch it," she announced, jumping up and running across the grass. "Don't go too far," Barbara called, but she was smiling, watching the little girl chase the butterfly with pure joy. Harold and Barbara sat side by side on the blanket, watching Cynthia play. She was wearing her favorite pink sundress and had insisted on braiding her own hair that morning, resulting in lopsided pigtails that were somehow even more adorable than when Harold did them properly. "She's so happy," Barbara murmured. "Tracey would be so proud." "I wish I could have known her better," Harold said, not for the first time. "I wish I could thank her for Cynthia." "She knew," Barbara assured him. "Even when she was hurt and struggling, she never spoke badly of you. She always believed you were a good man who just didn't know, and she was right." Harold turned to look at Barbara. The sunlight caught her blonde hair, making it shine gold. There was a smudge of jelly on her cheek from when Cynthia had hugged her earlier. She looked beautiful and real and utterly perfect. "I need to tell you something," Harold heard himself say. Barbara turned to him, eyebrows raised. "Okay. When you first showed up at my door with Cynthia, I was angry and confused and overwhelmed. But I was also struck by how brave you were. You didn't know how I'd react. I could have slammed the door in your face, could have called the police, could have been cruel. But you took that risk for Tracey, for Cynthia. It was the right thing to do," Barbara said simply. "Maybe. But it was also terrifying. And you did it anyway. And since then, you've been nothing but generous and patient with me. You've taught me how to be a father. You've shared your niece with me. You've become—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You've become one of the most important people in my life." Barbara's breath caught, her blue eyes wide. "Harold, I'm not saying this to make things awkward." Harold continued quickly. "I know our priority is Cynthia. I know we have to think about what's best for her. But I also know that somewhere along the way I stopped just thinking about you as Cynthia's aunt. I started thinking about you as Barbara, this incredible woman who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who sees past the money and the company to the person underneath. Harold, Barbara's voice trembled. "I feel the same way. But it's complicated. I know. We have to be careful. For Cynthia. I know that too." They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the admission that had just hung in the air between them. Then Cynthia came running back, holding a small yellow flower. "Look what I found. Isn't it pretty?" "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Barbara said, accepting the flower. "It's almost as pretty as you, Aunt Barbara," Cynthia said with a gap-toothed grin. Then she looked between the 2 adults, and something knowing flashed across her face. "You know what? You guys look really nice sitting together like that." "Do we?" Harold asked, amused. "Uh-huh, like in the movies when people are in love." Cynthia said it so matter-of-factly that both adults froze. I think you'd make a really pretty couple. And Mommy told me once that she wanted me to have a whole family, with a mommy and a daddy who loved each other. I think she'd be happy if you guys were together." Out of the mouths of babes, Harold and Barbara looked at each other, shocked and yet not surprised. Of course Cynthia had noticed. Children always noticed things adults tried to hide. "What do you think about that, Munchkin?" Harold asked carefully. "If someday maybe Barbara and I were more than just friends." Cynthia beamed. "I think it would be awesome. Then we could all live together and be a real family." Barbara's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetie, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Cynthia asked with the beautiful logic of a 5-year-old. "You love Daddy. Daddy loves you. I love both of you. That's a family." Harold reached out and took Barbara's hand. She looked at him, tears spilling over, and he squeezed gently. "She has a point." "This is crazy," Barbara whispered. "Maybe," Harold agreed. "But maybe crazy is exactly what we need." They didn't rush into anything. They were cautious, thoughtful, always putting Cynthia first. But that day in the park became a turning point. Harold and Barbara stopped pretending their feelings didn't exist and started, very slowly, exploring what it might mean to be more than co-parents. Harold took Barbara on a proper date, just the two of them, while Cynthia stayed with Barbara's friend for the evening. They went to a nice restaurant, but neither could stop talking about Cynthia, and they laughed at themselves for being so consumed by their daughter. "Our daughter," Barbara corrected softly. "It's okay to say it. I've been her mom in everything but biology. You don't have to tiptoe around it." Harold reached across the table and took her hand. "Our daughter," he agreed. "And maybe if you'll have me, we could make that official." Barbara's eyes widened. "Harold Moore, are you asking me to marry you over appetizers?" Harold laughed, blushing. "No, God no, I mean not yet, not until we're sure. But someday maybe. If you'd want that, with me." Barbara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Ask me again someday when you're sure, and maybe I'll say yes." They took it slow, but not too slow. There was no point in wasting time when they'd both already wasted so much. Over the next year, they built a relationship that was based on more than just their shared love for Cynthia. They discovered they had similar tastes in music, both hated horror movies, both loved early morning coffee and late-night conversations. The first real test of their budding relationship came on what would have been Tracey's 30th birthday. Barbara had been quiet all morning, and when Harold picked up Cynthia for their weekend together, he immediately noticed the sadness in Barbara's eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, standing in the doorway of her apartment. Barbara forced a smile. "It's just a hard day. Tracey's birthday. I always feel her absence more keenly on days like this." Harold's heart ached for her. "Come with us today. You shouldn't be alone." "I don't want to intrude on your time with Cynthia," Barbara protested. "You could never intrude," Harold said firmly. "We're a team, remember? Besides, maybe we should do something to honor Tracey. What did she like to do on her birthdays?" Barbara's eyes filled with tears. She loved the botanical gardens. She said being surrounded by growing things made her feel alive. So they went to the desert botanical garden, the three of them walking the winding paths through towering saguaros and blooming ocotillos. Cynthia ran ahead, chasing lizards and marveling at the exotic cacti, while Harold and Barbara walked side by side. "Tell me about her," Harold said softly. "Tell me about Tracey. The real her, not just the mother of my child. I want to know who she was." Barbara smiled through her tears, and for the next hour she painted a picture of her sister, Tracey who sang off-key in the shower, Tracey who cried during commercials, Tracey who made the best chocolate chip cookies and always burned the first batch, Tracey who believed in magic and love and second chances. "She would have loved you," Barbara said finally. "Not just as Cynthia's father, but as a person. She always saw the best in people. Even after Martha hurt her, even when she was struggling and alone, she never spoke badly of you. She told me once that she'd had one perfect night with a man who made her feel seen and valued, and that was worth everything that came after. Harold stopped walking, overcome with emotion. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for her. I'm so sorry she had to go through everything alone. She wasn't alone, Barbara corrected gently. She had me, and she had Cynthia, and she had love. Yes, it was hard, and yes, she deserved better. But she also had joy. Cynthia brought her so much joy. Don't let guilt rob you of the gratitude you should feel. Tracey gave you an incredible gift. They found a shaded bench and sat down. Cynthia was playing nearby, visible but out of earshot. Harold took Barbara's hand, intertwining their fingers. I'm grateful, he said quietly. Every single day I'm grateful for Cynthia, and I'm grateful for you, for keeping your promise to Tracey, for letting me into Cynthia's life, for being patient with me while I figure out how to be a father. You're doing amazing, Barbara assured him. Cynthia adores you. She talks about you constantly at school, tells everyone about her daddy who builds Legos and makes funny voices when he reads stories. Harold laughed, embarrassed. I do get a little theatrical with the voices. Don't stop, Barbara said, squeezing his hand. Never stop being that father, the one who's present and engaged and silly. That's what Cynthia needs, that's what I... She trailed off, blushing. What you what? Harold prompted, his heart beating faster. Barbara met his eyes. What I've come to love about you, the way you've transformed from this cold, distant CEO into this warm, caring father. The way you light up when Cynthia runs to you. The way you call her princess and mean it. You're not the same man who opened that door 8 months ago, Harold. You've become someone even better. Harold felt his throat tighten with emotion. I'm better because of both of you. You've shown me what matters. Before Cynthia, before you, I was just existing, not living. Going through the motions, chasing success that meant nothing. Now I wake up excited for the day. I actually look forward to going home because I know there might be a text from you or a drawing from Cynthia waiting for me. I have purpose beyond profit. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the depth of what had just been shared. Then Cynthia came running back, holding a bright red flower she'd found. For Mommy Tracey, she announced. Can we leave it somewhere special for her? They found a beautiful spot beneath a flowering Palo Verde tree, and Cynthia placed the flower carefully on the ground. Happy birthday, Mommy, she whispered. I miss you, but I'm okay. Daddy and Aunt Barbara take really good care of me. I love you. Harold and Barbara stood on either side of Cynthia, each placing a hand on her small shoulders, united in their love for this child and their respect for the woman who'd given her life. As the months passed, their relationship deepened in countless small ways. Harold started leaving work early to attend Cynthia's school events, and he was always surprised to see Barbara there too, even though she taught at a different school. They'd sit together in tiny kindergarten chairs, watching Cynthia perform in school plays or present her art projects, and Harold would catch himself thinking how natural it felt, how right. Harold learned about Barbara's dream of writing children's books, and he encouraged her relentlessly. One evening after putting Cynthia to bed, Barbara shyly showed him a manuscript she'd been working on. It was about a little girl who could talk to butterflies, and the butterfly who helped her find her way home after getting lost. This is incredible, Harold said, reading through the pages with genuine admiration. Barbara, this is really good. You need to publish this. It's not that simple, Barbara protested. Publishing is competitive and I don't have connections or... But I do, Harold interrupted. Let me help. Not with money, just with introductions. I know people in various industries, including publishing. Let me at least get you in front of the right people. Your talent will do the rest. Barbara hesitated, pride warring with practicality. I don't want to succeed because of your connections. You won't, Harold assured her. You'll succeed because you're talented and your story is beautiful. I'm just opening doors. You still have to walk through them. He made good on his promise, and within a few months Barbara had a meeting with a children's book publisher in Phoenix. She was terrified, but Harold helped her prepare, quizzed her on her pitch, and even offered to go with her for moral support, though she declined. The day of her meeting, Harold could barely concentrate on work. He kept checking his phone, waiting for news. When Barbara finally called, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. "They want to publish it," she sobbed. "Harold, they actually want my book. They said it's exactly what they're looking for, that it's fresh and heartfelt and children will love it." Harold felt pride swell in his chest. "I told you, Barbara, this is incredible. We need to celebrate." That evening, he surprised her and Cynthia with a special dinner at a fancy restaurant. Cynthia wore her favorite pink dress, and Barbara wore a blue dress that made her eyes shine. Harold raised his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. "To Barbara, talented author and soon-to-be published storyteller. You did this through your own merit and hard work. I'm so proud of you." Cynthia, not fully understanding but caught up in the excitement, raised her juice box. "To Aunt Barbara, you're the bestest." Barbara laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by the support and love surrounding her. Looking at Harold across the table, at the way he was smiling at her with such genuine pride and affection, she felt something shift in her heart. This wasn't just partnership anymore. This wasn't just co-parenting or friendship. This was something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. Barbara learned about Harold's past too, about the lonely little boy he'd been. One Saturday afternoon, while Cynthia napped, Harold showed Barbara his childhood photo albums. The pictures told a sad story. A small boy in expensive clothes, always alone or with nannies, never with his parents. Birthday parties with hired entertainers but no friends. School events where other children were picked up by loving parents while Harold waited for the family driver. "They weren't bad people," Harold said quietly, staring at a photo of his 8-year-old self opening Christmas presents alone. "They just didn't know how to be parents. Their own parents had been the same way, so they thought providing material things was enough. I had the best toys, the best education, everything money could buy. Except time, except attention, except love." Barbara's heart broke for the little boy in those photos. "Is that why you work so hard? To prove something to them?" Harold considered this. Maybe at first. They're both gone now, died in a car accident when I was in college. But by then, working was all I knew how to do. It was the only thing I was good at. Or at least I thought it was. Until Cynthia showed me I could be good at something else. Something more important. "You're an amazing father," Barbara said firmly. "You give Cynthia everything you never had. Presence, attention, genuine love. You're breaking the cycle." "I'm trying," Harold said. "Every day I'm trying. And you help me. You show me what healthy parenting looks like. You're patient where I'm impatient. You're calm where I panic. You balance me." Barbara reached out and took his hand. "You balance me too. You encourage me to dream bigger, to take risks, to believe in myself. Before you, I was content to just get by, to play it safe. You've shown me I can want more. Be more." They looked at each other, and the air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. Harold leaned in slowly, giving Barbara time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met in a soft, tender kiss that felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that for months," Harold admitted. "Me too," Barbara whispered. Their first real fight came about 6 months into their relationship. Harold, in a misguided attempt to help, had paid off Barbara's student loans without asking her first. He'd gotten the account information from a document she'd left at his house and had simply written a check for the full balance. When Barbara found out, she was livid. She showed up at his house on a Tuesday evening, and Cynthia immediately sensed the tension and quietly went to her room. "How dare you?" Barbara's voice shook with anger. "Who gave you the right to make financial decisions for me?" "I was trying to help," Harold defended. "You mentioned how much stress those loans caused you, how they limited your options. I have the money, Barbara. Why shouldn't I use it to help someone I care about?" "Because it's not about the money," Barbara shot back. "It's about respect. About treating me as an equal, not a charity case. Did you even think about how this would make me feel? Like I'm some poor woman you need to rescue?" "That's not how I see you at all," Harold protested. "Then why didn't you ask me first? Why didn't you discuss it with me like I'm a partner in your life instead of just making decisions for me? Barbara's eyes blazed. I've worked hard to be independent, Harold. I've made sacrifices, budgeted carefully, took responsibility for my own debts. And you just swooped in and took that away from me. Like my struggles and my choices don't matter. Harold felt his own anger rising. I'm sorry I tried to make your life easier. I'm sorry I wanted to give you freedom from debt so you could focus on your writing and Cynthia instead of working yourself to exhaustion. That wasn't your choice to make, Barbara shouted. Don't you see? This is exactly what I was afraid of. That your money would create an imbalance between us. That you'd start thinking you know what's best for me because you have more resources. I'm not a problem for you to solve, Harold. I'm a person with my own agency and my own pride. They argued for another hour, voices raised, both hurt and angry, and saying things they didn't fully mean. Finally, exhausted, they stood on opposite sides of Harold's living room, breathing hard. I don't know how to do this, Harold admitted quietly. I don't know how to be in a relationship where I have more money. I see a problem, I want to fix it. That's who I am. I need you to see me as more than a problem to fix, Barbara said, her voice cracking. I need you to see me as your equal regardless of bank account balances. If you can't do that, then this isn't going to work. The thought of losing her hit Harold like a physical blow. Don't, he said urgently. Please don't give up on us, you're right. I was wrong. I should have talked to you first, should have respected your autonomy. I love you, Barbara. I love you so much that I forget sometimes that loving someone doesn't mean controlling their life or making their decisions for them. It was the first time he'd said those words. I love you. Barbara stared at him, tears streaming down her face. What did you say? Harold crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his. I love you. I'm in love with you. Not because you're Cynthia's aunt or because you're a great co-parent. I'm in love with you, Barbara Watson, because you're brilliant and kind and strong and you challenge me to be better every single day. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for overstepping, for not respecting you, for letting my desire to help overshadow your right to make your own choices. Please forgive me. Barbara sobbed, then threw her arms around his neck. I love you too, you infuriating, generous, well-meaning idiot. I love you so much it scares me. They held each other tightly, both crying, both relieved, both understanding that they'd just navigated their first real conflict and come out stronger for it. I'll call the bank tomorrow, Harold promised. I'll reverse the payment. You can keep making your payments on your schedule. No, Barbara said, pulling back to look at him. Keep it paid off. But next time ask me first. Discuss it with me. Make me part of the decision. I will, Harold swore. I promise. Always. From the hallway they heard a small voice. Are you guys done fighting? Because I made you a picture to help you feel better. They looked over to see Cynthia standing there in her pajamas holding a piece of paper. On it she'd drawn 3 stick figures holding hands with a big heart around them. Come here, baby girl, Barbara said, and Cynthia ran to them. They scooped her up between them, hugging her tight, and Harold knew in that moment that this was his family. His real, imperfect, beautiful family. Cynthia was thrilled by the relationship, constantly asking when Barbara was moving in, when they were getting married, whether she'd get to be a flower girl. She drew pictures of the 3 of them as a family, always together, always happy. Mommy Tracey is in heaven watching us, Cynthia would say. I think she's happy we're together. The holidays brought new challenges and new joys. Thanksgiving was their first major holiday as a family unit, and Harold insisted on hosting at his mansion. He'd never cooked a Thanksgiving dinner before, had always either worked through the holiday or ordered catering. But this year was different. I want to do it right, he told Barbara. A real family Thanksgiving. They worked together in his massive kitchen, Barbara patiently teaching him how to prepare a turkey, make gravy from scratch, and create the perfect pumpkin pie. Cynthia was given the important job of setting the table, which she took very seriously, carefully placing each fork and knife with intense concentration. "This spot is for Mommy Tracey," Cynthia announced, setting an extra place at the table. "She can't eat, but she should still have a seat." Harold and Barbara exchanged glances, both fighting tears. "That's perfect, sweetheart," Barbara managed to say. When they finally sat down to dinner, the three of them around the enormous dining table that had never hosted a real meal before, Harold was asked to say grace. He wasn't religious, had never said grace in his life. But looking at Barbara and Cynthia, he found words. "I'm thankful for second chances, for unexpected blessings, for a knock on my door that changed my entire life. I'm thankful for Tracey, who gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. I'm thankful for Barbara, who kept a promise and opened her heart. And I'm thankful for Cynthia, who taught me that the most important success isn't measured in dollars, but in love." His voice cracked. "I'm thankful that I get to be here, with my family, and that I finally understand what it means to be truly wealthy." Cynthia insisted they go around and each say what they were thankful for. When it was her turn, she said, "I'm thankful for my 2 mommies and my daddy, and for my new family, and for butterflies and unicorns and hot chocolate." They all laughed, the moment perfect in its imperfection. Christmas was even more special. Harold went overboard with decorations, hiring a company to transform his mansion into a winter wonderland with lights, garland, and an enormous tree in the living room. But the best part was Christmas morning. Cynthia woke them both up at 6 a.m., bouncing on Harold's bed where Barbara had spent the night in the guest room. Officially, though they'd shared late-night cocoa in the living room until well past midnight, talking and laughing and stealing kisses when Cynthia was safely asleep. Under the tree were mountains of presents. Harold had gone overboard, he knew, but he had 6 years of birthdays and Christmases to make up for. There were dolls and art supplies and books and clothes and more. But Cynthia's favorite gift wasn't expensive at all. It was a handmade photo album Barbara had created, filled with pictures of Tracey, of Cynthia as a baby and toddler, of moments and memories. "This is Mommy when she was pregnant with you," Barbara narrated, pointing to a photo. "She was so excited to meet you, and this is your first Christmas. Mommy made those little reindeer antlers you're wearing." Cynthia traced the photos reverently, studying her mother's face. "Tell me the stories," she pleaded. "Tell me everything about Mommy." So they sat on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys, and Barbara told stories. Harold listened too, learning more about the woman who had given him his daughter. He laughed at the funny stories, felt his heart ache at the tender ones, and fell a little bit in love with Tracey Watson through Barbara's words. Later that evening, after Cynthia had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Barbara and Harold sat by the fireplace, both exhausted, but happy. "Thank you for including Tracey today," Barbara said softly. "A lot of men would want to erase her, to pretend she never existed. She'll always be part of Cynthia's life, which means she's part of mine," Harold said firmly. "I'll never try to replace her. I just want to add to what she started." Barbara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're a good man, Harold Moore. Better than you give yourself credit for." "I'm trying to be worthy of both of you," Harold murmured, kissing the top of her head. As winter turned to spring, their relationship continued to grow and deepen. They had their challenges, of course. Harold had to learn to balance work and family, and he didn't always get it right. There was a week when a major crisis at the company consumed him, and he missed 3 bedtimes in a row. Cynthia was understanding but sad, and Barbara gently called him out. "She needs you, Harold. The company will survive, but Cynthia's childhood won't wait." It was a wake-up call Harold needed. He promoted one of his vice presidents to handle day-to-day operations and stepped back from the minute details of running more tech solutions. He was still CEO, still involved in major decisions, but he was no longer drowning in every small crisis. His employees were shocked, his board members concerned, but Harold's resolve was firm. "My daughter needs me, and I refuse to be the parent mine were. The company will adapt." And it did. Surprisingly, more tech solutions actually thrived with Harold's lighter touch. His leadership became more strategic, more focused, and his employees responded to their CEO, who actually left at reasonable hours, and talked about his daughter with obvious pride. Barbara faced her own challenges too. Her book was being published, which meant deadlines and edits and marketing responsibilities. There were late nights when she was exhausted from teaching all day and then working on revisions. Harold supported her however he could, taking Cynthia more often to give Barbara time to write, bringing her dinner when she forgot to eat, celebrating every small milestone in the publishing process. "I couldn't do this without you," Barbara told him one evening when he showed up with Thai food and encouragement. "Yes, you could," Harold corrected. "You're brilliant and determined. I'm just here to make it easier." The day Barbara's book was published was a celebration. Harold threw a party at his mansion, inviting Barbara's friends, her fellow teachers, even some of his business associates. Cynthia was the star of the evening, proudly showing everyone her book. "My Aunt Barbara wrote it." "Well, she's going to be my mom soon, but she'll always be my Aunt Barbara too." "Isn't it the best book ever?" Harold watched Barbara glow with pride and happiness, and he knew. He was ready. He'd known for months, really, but this moment crystallized it. This was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. This was the person he wanted to build a future with. This was home. 18 months after that first knock on his door, Harold knew it was time. He planned it carefully, wanting it to be perfect. It was a Sunday morning, and the three of them were making pancakes in Harold's kitchen, which had become their weekly tradition. Cynthia was covered in flour. Barbara was laughing at something silly Harold had said, and the morning sun was streaming through the windows. Harold flipped the last pancake, turned off the stove, and then got down on one knee right there in the kitchen. "What are you doing, Daddy?" Cynthia asked, confused. Barbara turned around and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Barbara Watson," Harold said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "You came into my life when I needed you most. You brought me my daughter and gave me a purpose beyond profit margins and board meetings. But more than that, you showed me what real love looks like. It's patient and kind. It's selfless and brave. It's in the small moments, the quiet mornings, the shared laughter. You've made me a better man, a better father, and a happier human being. I love you with everything I have, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day. Will you marry me?" He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Barbara was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, yes, yes." Harold stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing while Cynthia cheered and danced around them, chanting, "We're going to be a real family. We're going to be a real family." They planned the wedding for 6 months later, wanting Cynthia to be involved in every step. It was a small ceremony in Harold's backyard, which they'd transformed into a garden paradise for the occasion. White flowers everywhere, twinkling lights strung through the trees, and a small group of close friends and family. Cynthia was the flower girl, of course, wearing a pink dress that made her look like a princess. She took her job very seriously, carefully dropping rose petals along the aisle. Before the ceremony, Harold and Barbara had one more stop to make. They drove to the cemetery where Tracey was buried, the three of them dressed in their wedding clothes. Barbara knelt at her sister's grave, placing a bouquet of white roses on the stone. "Hey, Trace," she whispered. "We did it. We kept your promise. Cynthia knows her father, and he's everything you said he'd be. And I know you might be mad at me for falling in love with him, but I also think you'd understand. I think maybe this was what you wanted all along. For Cynthia to have a complete family. For all of us to find happiness together." She paused, wiping tears. "Thank you for my beautiful niece. Thank you for trusting me. I'll take care of them both, I promise. And I'll make sure Cynthia always knows how much you loved her." Harold stepped forward and placed his hand on the gravestone. "Thank you, Tracey. Thank you for Cynthia. Thank you for the gift of her life. I promise to be the father and the man you believed I could be. Rest well, knowing your daughter is loved beyond measure." Cynthia came forward with her own small flower, a pink rose she'd insisted on bringing. She laid it on the grave and said simply, I miss you, Mommy Tracey. But I'm really happy now. And I think you are too. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Barbara walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing Pechelbel's Canon, and when Harold saw her in her simple white dress, her blonde hair flowing free, he had to blink back tears. She was stunning, radiant, perfect. They exchanged traditional vows, and then they added their own. Harold promised to always put family first, to be present and engaged, to never let work consume him again. Barbara promised to love Cynthia as her own, to honor Tracey's memory, and to always challenge Harold to be his best self. When the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Cynthia shouted, "Finally," and everyone laughed. At the reception, Cynthia grabbed the microphone during the toasts, determined to say her piece. "I'm really happy," she announced to everyone. "I used to just have my mommy, and then I just had Aunt Barbara. But now I have a daddy and a mommy Barbara, and we're a family. My real mommy is in heaven, but I think she's watching, and she's really, really happy. Because this was her last wish. She wanted me to have a daddy, and she wanted me to be happy, and I am." She paused, then added seriously, "Also, the cake is really good. You should all try it." The guests applauded, many of them wiping tears. Later that night, after the guests had left and Cynthia was asleep in her room upstairs, Harold and Barbara stood on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out over the valley. The lights of Phoenix twinkled below them like earthbound stars. "We did it," Barbara whispered, leaning against Harold's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "We did," Harold agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Against all odds, we made a family." "Do you think Tracey's watching?" Barbara asked. Harold was quiet for a moment, then said, "I do, and I think she's at peace. Her last wish came true. Cynthia has everything she needs. Love, security, happiness. That's all any mother wants for her child." "Thank you," Barbara said softly, "for being the man she believed you were." "Thank you," Harold echoed, "for giving me a second chance at life." They stood there in comfortable silence, both thinking about the strange and beautiful journey that had brought them here. A one-night stand that became a daughter, a tragedy that revealed a secret, a knock on a door that changed everything. Downstairs, in her pink bedroom with its butterfly murals and her drawings covering the walls, Cynthia slept peacefully, a smile on her face. On her nightstand was a photo of Tracey holding her as a baby, and next to it a newer photo of Harold, Barbara, and Cynthia on their wedding day, all three of them laughing. Two families merged into one, a sister's sacrifice honored, a father's dreams fulfilled, a child loved by everyone who mattered, and at the center of it all, the last wish of a woman who had died too young but whose love had been powerful enough to bring everyone together. That was Tracey's legacy. Not grief, not loss, but love. Pure, unconditional, transformative love that had reached beyond death to create something beautiful. In the morning, they would wake up as a family. Harold would make his terrible coffee that Barbara pretended to like. Cynthia would demand pancakes shaped like hearts. They would laugh and tease and plan their day together. There would be challenges ahead, disagreements and difficulties, because that's what life was. But they would face it together, the three of them, bound by love and loss and the determined spirit of a woman who had believed in second chances. Tracey Watson had gotten her last wish. Her daughter knew her father. Her sister found love. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, she was smiling, knowing that the people she loved most were finally, truly home. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.